Over the last couple of times together, it's been said that stillness is not what it seems. That stillness is perhaps a doorway. And we really need to understand and look at what stillness is for us. We already know the true nature of movement now. Now, I'm sure you, like me, if someone says to us, I'm going with the flow, you immediately recognize that what they're saying is that I'm in perpetual movement outward, because that's the nature of flow. And that's, to most people, what life is, a movement outward. And if you're in the flow, you're in the flow of life, going somewhere. But for us who've experienced being still, we now know that movement is a movement inward. Life comes into us, not us moving in and with life. But where and what is stillness? Because this body is always in perpetual motion. The heart is beating, the lymph is going through the systems. So in fact, we are always in motion. And yet now we can say, I'm still. All right, we can say, I'm here. But is here really still? So where is stillness in us? So we can look at that and really to bring together the dots in a little way, or perhaps get a little technical. We can go back to that saying that was so often quoted. Take all perceptions from the sensual, the aesthetic, and the transcendent level of mind, and bring them to the subtle level of body, speech, and mind, the body of appearances, the speech of vibration, and the mind of awareness, from where they flow down the columns at the side of the spine, the positive, negative, subjective, objective, where they meet, and then rise up through the central column of pure mind as our words and our deeds. Now we know if we watch the phenomena of an experience that we have, it does have to go through the process of passing down those columns to meet. But when the experience, meets at the base of the spine, it's like it cancels itself out. And there's no reaction. But there is a response. Where and what does that response connote? Where does it come from? So to ask ourselves, where is stillness? If we bring it back to that saying just quoted, we can maybe pinpoint it as a phenomena. Translated in yourself from your own experience of, you're saying, okay, I'm here, I'm present, and the experiences of life come in as a perception, passing through the columns, coming down, cancelling out, and yet in that meeting with what we can say is the movement of the experience and the stillness, whatever that is, something arises. What is it? that brings a response if in fact the perception that goes in when it goes to the base of the spine is cancelled out? Where is there a force? So it has to be something else that occurs when that movement meets that stillness. And from it, up the central column, is our response. And we now don't know what that response is going to be. It's like a student asking the master, what is the Buddha? And pausing for a moment, he says, stinky urine. Where does that come from? Certainly not from the mind. So we can ask ourselves this very important question. What is stillness really? Where is it in us? And how is it that these responses arise in us from that meeting now of the experiences flowing in? The perceptions following their channels as they have to, like the breath does, down to the base of the spine. I'll remind you of a story and see how we can relate this now to this that we're endeavoring to discover. It's that story about that samurai lord who was gathered with a group of his other great swordsmen, and as they do, discussing the battles that they'd been in, the experiences they'd had, their victories. And one particular samurai lord said, I want to recount to you an unusual experience that I've had. He said, I had a servant, and I sent my servant to another province to do an errand for me with the Lord there. And inadvertently, without purpose, he insulted the Lord. Now this Lord is known to be a vindictive man. And according to the laws of the samurai, which cover all the provinces and lordships, I was duty-bound to send him back to that province, where without any doubt he was going to be killed, punished for the insult that he inadvertently made. So, says the samurai, I said to my servant, look, you're already a dead man. There's no doubt that when I send you back to that Lord, he's going to wreak punishment on you which will require your death. So he said, you're already dead. He said, but, you can perhaps have an opportunity to die with honor. He said, come out into the grounds with me and let us sword fight. Now, the Lord, he said, I had a dual purpose in doing this. He said, because I had never fought anyone who ostensibly was already dead. So I wanted to test my swordsmanship against him. So I invited him to come out to the field and fight me. Well, he replied, but Lord, I've never held a sword in my hand. I know nothing about swordsmanship. But I told him that he had an opportunity. If he could kill me, then he could go to that province and die with great honor. So he agreed. So we went down to the field. And I have to tell you, he said to all of those other samurais, that this fellow all but beat me. every time I made a move, he bettered me. Until I found that I was at an absolute disadvantage. He did nothing, and yet I was backed against the wall with no retreat. So I could do nothing else but raise my sword and sever him in two. Now the other samurais who were gathered around said, well, was it because he gave you an opportunity to kill him? He said, no. He had me at his advantage. So I had to make that move to kill him. So I did. Now the question that arises for us out of this story is, what was it that that servant had? What happens when, to all intents and purposes, we're already dead? Can we relate that to stillness? Can you relate that now to this place when something happens? Something is in our face. And instead of reacting as we would before, maybe there's a moment's, a millisecond's pause. And there's no reaction. Then there's perhaps a response, or maybe there's a not. But what is in that pause? What is the recognition? What do we know and experience in that pause, in that millisecond that may be not a millisecond at all? Because there's this that we've called stillness, because that's our experience of it. We've become still, so to speak. But what does it really mean? Because what was it for this servant that then he in fact had power over life in this great swordsman? What is it then that's enacted when stillness and movement meet?
Oneness.
Yes, we know that.
He had nowhere to go and nothing to do.
And
Because
yes,
he was already dead.
he was already dead. So what is this phenomenon? What does it mean for us? And what does it connote in relationship to stillness now? Certainly, that stillness is not what it seems, isn't it? Sure, it's that which is there for us. And movement comes in, and when they meet, something happens. Not a reaction, but a response. What is it then? What happens to that perception that divides, goes through the channels, comes to the base of the spine, cancels itself out? And yet there's a response. What is it that's brought about? What is it that brings up that response from that place up the channel? And we do. We're not inert beings now. We interact with life. What is it now?
I see it as divine inspiration, where we, at that point, that's where we invite the divine to inspire us, to breathe into us.
That's a whole other story. We're going to go there. Oh, we're there. That's giving a name to that. But what is it in us?
Surrender.
Okay? That brings about stillness. What is stillness?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's awareness.
Awareness?
Nothing else, just awareness.
Uh-huh. Is that in that space when we
There is
wait?
no space. There's no such a
There's
thing.
no millisecond between that movement. Yeah?
Smart, to me, it must be like the stillness in the center of the dancing dervish when he goes around.
Uh-huh.
There's
uh-huh.
movement all the time, but in the
Uh-huh,
center
uh-huh.
stillness. And
Yes, yes.
yet it's both the same thing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes?
It sort of strikes me that, you know, when the guy fought back with the sword, that he had the freedom of nothing left to lose. That's possibly not what that stillness is, but it's somehow what it produces. Somehow it when you know that there's no actual real attachment to what's going on.
Okay. Over these last couple of days, there have been several who've come to visit with me, and it's been found to have been said, the saying that Divine Mother used to use very often, just pretend you're dead.
Because if you're dead, then the only
Doesn't matter.
only energy, the only thing is God. Then, isn't it?
That's right, the divine, right?
So in that moment, he'd lost all his human mechanisms or whatever, and just went straight into that God.
Right on.
Well, like you said on Sunday, Pat, make God real.
Okay.
Dirty word God, make it real.
Yes. Right. So we're putting the dots together.
Yeah.
Oh, you're too quick for me. But what is this stillness now?
There you go. You just ruined her day. She's going to spend all day with it.
I think the pressure's off. It's falling in.
Where is it? What is it? You can't say here because here is always changing. Well, we know the nature of movement. We need also to know the nature of stillness.
I think
Yeah.
for me it's a bit like when, like you say, when the two sides come together and there's no arguing about it anything anymore. It's just like a completion,
All right? Mm-hmm.
and then all this stops.
Yes.
Nothing to gain, nothing to lose.
Nothing to gain, nothing to lose. Yes.
Like everything's in balance, equally weighed.
When the in-breath goes in and just before you breathe out again, that sort of that fullness, and just like when you breathe out, it's that complete emptiness. It's just that turning of the tide, or that
Right.
moment.
Uh-huh.
Then
Good character, isn't it?
did you pay your police fine? Not yet.
Let's munch on it a while and see what we can come up with. Look at it. We're experiencing it every moment. And we now have that ability of awareness to be able to recognize